All right, well, welcome everybody. This afternoon / evening, welcome to this OTF Connects webinar. Today, our webinar is called Lessons from Beyond. It's going to be facilitated by Jody Williams and Sandra Indian. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, we usually begin webinars with our land acknowledgement, but we're going to be doing things differently this evening. We'll be doing it the correct way. I'm learning a lot just from Jody and Sandra and having the opportunity to connect with them on this webinar. So tonight we're going to be doing things the right way. We're going to be hoping to really start off this evening with, proper protocol usually is when we're working with the community it's really good practice to be able to give them the space to be able to speak. So we're going to be changing things up just slightly in a minute here. I'm going to start off by just letting you know I'm the moderator this evening. My name is Ariana. If you've got any questions at all, please feel free to let me know, and I'd be more than happy to help you out. I'll ask you just to make sure that you are muted for this evening. It's going to be an incredible evening. So I'll start off by just introducing our facilitators. Jody Williams currently works as the Indigenous Education Coordinator for the Dufferin-Peel Catholic District School Board. As the co-chair for the First Nations, Métis and Inuit Education Association of Ontario, Jody provides educational workshops and develops resources to support Indigenous education in schools. She is also the lead. She's also the lead on a provincial community of practice for Indigenous knowledge and mathematics. And now I will introduce Sandra. Sandra Indian, Gigi Go Kwe is an Anishinaabe Kwe from Onengaming First Nation. She takes great pride in being an Aniko Baijigan, a Nokomis, and being the matriarch for her family. She's a storyteller, a knowledge keeper. She promotes wellness and the importance of being connected to the land. Her background is in the field of education and social work services. So for now, I'm going to turn it over to Sandra, who's going to be leading us in our land acknowledgement.
Bonjour, Manitou, Mr. Timindigo, Menwe, Ganeashi, Kindigo, Gishigo, Kwandigo, Awasasin, Dotem, Onigming Donji. So, what I said was the three names that I do carry. They were given to me throughout my life. And I said, Onigming Donji. Onigming Donji means where my spirit roams. No matter where I live or I travel, that's where my spirit is always gonna roam. So here we are, we have a video here of how we acknowledge the land here, the women. These are women from who are connected to where I'm from, Onigming. And so we gathered there this summer, and Jody and her the camera person took a video of us, and this is where we're doing the land acknowledgement. We're singing to the water, to the lake, to the trees. And if you take a really good look at the trees there and look at the land, this is they are really, you can see how grateful they are that we're there, and they're acknowledging us too. And there you can see the trees dancing as we're singing the song. And you can turn it up a little bit more there, Jody. And we're singing to the lake. We're looking out to the lake, and the lake is, the women are very connected to the lake here. In my community, Onigming means portage. That means the land between two lakes there. This is one of the lakes, and that's who we're singing to, is the Lake of the Woods. The Lake of the Woods spans like into the Minnesota border, also to the Manitoba border in Ontario. So we're singing to the sky, the trees, the water, all the animals that are on the land and in the water. And the wind came. The wind also joined us in it. You could feel that gratitude of being acknowledged. And this is the true understanding of, land acknowledgement. We're acknowledging them and they're acknowledging us too. It was such a beautiful short song that we did up there. And the protocols that, when we start any type of gathering, I did that home here already this afternoon. I have 2 birch bark dish, one for the land, one for the fire that I will be offering to the, because we'll be talking about some of the people that came before us who are now traveled to the star world and are back to being star people. So I have that dish, and I also made a birch bark dish of one for the land where I will be, this is to honor your spirit, each and every one of you who's come to join us, because this it's when we gather, we see it as it's those spirits that brought us together here this evening. And so that's who I'm honoring. I'm also honoring the spirit of this gathering, because each and one of you bring your own energies here, your own helpers, and together when we gather, we're the ones that are creating this I would say ceremony of gathering together and learning from one another. Okay, Miigwech.
So as Ariana stated, now you got a little sense of a real land acknowledgement that, well, we won't get into land acknowledgements today, but Miigwech, Sandra, for your beautiful opening words. So I'll just introduce myself as well. So Bojo Kinawea, Mianga Indigenous, meanwhile, Yetagayeli, Yatswas Youngyats, Emek and Dodam, Anishinaabe Kwe, Mi'kmaq Irish Kwe and Dao. So as you can see here on the slide, here's our socials. So I do have Twitter there, if you're a Twitter person, and our contact information as well. And so we're here today to share with you an exciting collaboration. We actually are launching it officially on December 2nd. I'll share that link if you don't know about that, where it's an opportunity to meet all the collaborators on this. But this has been a huge project over the course of many years. And it's actually a 3rd iteration, and I'll get into that later on in the presentation. So the first iteration was lessons from the earth. And then there's a lessons from the water. And now this one that we're speaking to is lessons from the beyond. So learning from the stars, revitalizing star knowledge. And of course, I'll share with you a little bit about the inspiration behind this work. So it mentioned in my bio, so I co-chair a provincial organization, and through that work, we lead a community of practice in the area of Indigenous knowledge and mathematics. That has been going on now for 5 years. And when we were first approached to do this work, we were intrigued by the opportunity because, as I'm sure many of you may know, oftentimes Indigenous knowledge kind of gets associated with, in elementary, often it's social studies, or maybe geography, or maybe history. And we saw this as an opportunity to go beyond that and really showcase to the world how rich and diverse and sophisticated these knowledge systems are. And of course, colonization and our Western education system has done an enormous damage on the devaluing and minimizing these knowledge systems. So when this opportunity came up, we were like, yes, let's do it. And then we were thinking, okay, what would be a way to explore this? And in these conversations that I was really lucky to be part of, and a lot of the work that I do over the years has always been this involvement about discussing the stars. And So we thought, and then we, we're talking with different elders and knowledge keepers, whether it's Anishinaabe or Cree or Kanien'kehá:ka, and we also started with this collaboration with NASA. And what we found in these conversations we were having was these common understandings or tellings that we come from the stars. So Sandra's going to talk a little bit about more of the Anishinaabeg understanding of this, but just to give you kind of like a brief version of this was that, we have these tellings that talk about where we come from through these indigenous knowledges. But then we also have this Western science story as well that says, when a star is doing its thing, it's burning up all of its fuel. And in the process of doing that, going from helium to hydrogen, it's, as it comes towards the end of its life cycle, it starts converting into other elements right down until it gets to its iron core. Now, this isn't for all stars, this is for certain stars. And then it blows up in this super massive supernova and it spews out all of its elements throughout its surroundings. And then eventually over time, because of gravity and heat, they start to coalesce and stars are born. And of course, when a star is born, planets are formed. And then with planets such as Earth, life emerges. And our bodies are literally made up of stardust. The elements that make you and I up and the Earth and everything around us literally comes from the stars. And so when we were having these conversations, we were really excited about this idea that, well, what if we could create this resource in such a way that it invites the opportunity in to bring into dialogue these multiple knowledge systems, like different knowledge systems on par with each other, not one's better than the other, almost like pieces of a puzzle that we all come together. And through that, we can kind of co-create something really new and beautiful moving forward. So that's to give you kind of the background, inspiration. And from that, we've just had this wild ride of beautiful knowledges that have been shared with us that we're going to talk to you about. So I'm going to now put it over to Sandra to speak a little bit more about this.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. So for me, being that, Anishinaabe Kwe, all those teachings that I received from my family, they always taught us about the importance of the water and the importance of carrying that new life in your body and to have that respect for ourselves. And this didn't come because we come from a history of being colonized. Some of those pieces weren't there when we as we travel on this short time here on this earth, from being born, traveling from the stars and coming down and coming to be being placed inside our mother's sacred water and in her body. That's all connected. Those are the same stories that we hear today. Like now that there's snow on the ground, this is the time where we're able to tell a little bit of the, you can tell the legends now. We don't usually tell them in the summertime, just in special places, and then only during certain times you can tell them in the summer. But you can tell them freely in the winter. So all these things, all these stories, these legends we heard, and they're all connected up with the star formations. And I can give you a few examples of that. One of the things that has been this lady had this vision to bring back the ceremony of honoring the moon, and she went around telling them about her dream, her vision, and bringing that back, the ceremony of honoring the moon. And honoring that, the women honor themselves because we're the same as the moon in our cycle. And also that we're connected to the water and we're just as powerful as that moon, and the women are just as powerful of it as that. And there's a legend there too on the moon. There's a legend there, and you can see a little boy on the moon there. So there's a whole story there, a legend that could be told. And and it might be slightly different from the area that you're at. So the best thing to do is like those protocols, offer that tobacco to see who in your area, carries these legends and can tell them. And so those are the ones. I don't know the full story of it, but I know pieces of it. And so when we do some of the ceremonies, that's who we acknowledge is that moon. And we do a ceremony to honor it. And the moon is the one who is in charge of the the tides of the oceans and the lakes. And then even as women, because we carry that same amount of water in our bodies as the earth. And so we feel that, and they call it moving water. And that's what the other grandmas that have taught me things, they have said that it moves our water. That's why sometimes during the full moon, the women are very emotional, or they have just all these feeling of tiredness and everything, because the women, like I said, are the keepers of the water, and they're the ones who are the matriarchs in charge of taking care of their families, our community, and our nation. And it's tiring, and that moon is the one that reminds them, hey, stop, you got to take care of yourself here, let the other women take care of you. So we have protocols like that, and these are just little pieces that that I'm sharing here, and not the whole story and teachings of it. And the other piece that I wanted to mention too, when Jody talked about some of the star formations and the Milky Way also, because we have in our culture, this is the path of the spirits that they travel. Even the young ones, the babies that are being born onto this earth, this is where they travel before they come down to the earth, and then they come onto the earth. And then when they're on the earth, and they're placed in their mother's womb. And so, and just to make things really short, that is here is an example. The Milky Way is that path. And also the path that they come through is that umbilical cord. And so that's the same path that they travel to be with the mother. And it's a reminder. So there's always going to be things, and even the rainbow, when you see a rainbow in the sky, that's just a reminder of that connection that we have, that path from the earth and up to the sky world. And then when you get to the sky world, there's this. So everything that happens to the earth is like we're the same as the earth, the women. So I'm going to stop right there. I don't know if if I need to mention any more, or.
I think just to comment on what Sandra is saying, which is also part of a protocol piece, and we'll remind people again, is, when you have the opportunity to sit and listen to these knowledges, like sometimes I know as teachers, we're trained to just extract, right? Like just when you come to a session like this, you learn things so that you can just take it and use it in your classroom the next day. But it's really important to remember that you can't take that same process and apply it over here. So sometimes when you're listening, like just now, that's for you. That's for your information. That's for you to, that's the gift you've received by listening to that. It doesn't necessarily mean you can just go and replicate it or repeat it back. And so something that often happens in education through this extractivism is that we don't even think to ask permission. And we really should be doing that. That's a shift. That's a practice that needs to change. when we're considering Indigenous knowledge systems in our classroom. When you encounter a knowledge in whatever form it's come to you in, when you're thinking about bringing that into your classroom, do you have the permission? If it's story, did you get the permission to share that story? Is it coming from a credible source? Can you cite your source? We do these things in other areas, like in English, for example, you have to use, cite your sources and used with permission and things like that. So we have to do the same thing when we're talking about these things. Now, there's certainly the resource that we're going to get into that is been given with permission to use. So yes, use the pieces in the resource. But if there's things outside of the resource, I just want to be very mindful and bring that to your attention to be thinking that way, because this is where we also see a lot of appropriation happening is people just, hearing things and replicating them, or like Googling things. Be very careful about Google. The other thing is, when we talk about, Indigenous peoples also have our own methodologies, epistemologies, and pedagogies. And we don't separate things out like we do in school. I mean, in elementary, I guess there's more natural opportunities to teach kind of holistically, but certainly in secondary, that's the world I come from. Everything's separated, right? You go to this class for geography, you go to this class for science. Everything is connected, and that knowledge comes from our surroundings. It comes from the natural world. It comes from the sky. It comes from the water. It comes from the earth. It comes from the trees. It comes from and understanding those things. And the other thing too is that there's a deep spiritual component that goes along with that. And again, that's where it gets a little bit dicey when it comes into the education system, because what we don't want, we want to be very mindful, especially when we hear about or talk about the spirituality component, that we're definitely not mimicking or trying to replicate those pieces in classes. Like that piece has to stay with the community, with the people. In my board, we have a policy that says any cultural knowledge will only come from Indigenous peoples. So we provide, right now it's virtual visits, and invite people to speak on behalf of that, because it also is like completely different in terms of the different nations. And even within the Anishinaabe Nation, for example, it's very, very different depending on where you go and who you talk to. Is there anything else, Sandra, you want to add into this?
Yes, but I just have to answer my door here for a second.
Okay. That's amazing. These things happen. I'm surprised my dogs aren't barking, because usually that's what happens for me. So maybe what I'll do while we're waiting for Sandra to come back is, the other thing that we want to be thinking about is our education system itself. So our education system is a colonial tool. If you think about it, it's design and the beliefs and values that is taught, that we teach in our education system, are completely opposite to, how we should be, very natural. If we think about our babies and our little toddlers and how they're understanding and exploring the world, that's really how education should be. It should be very inquisitive and wondering and exploring. But instead, we come into our system and we are taught, you gotta follow the rules, you gotta learn the things that has been determined as to what's important, predetermined as to what's important, and then you gotta keep going through education and then you gotta get post-secondary education in order to get a good job, because really getting a good job means having more money, and having more money can buy more stuff. And really, by the end of your life, most people come to realize that that's been a whole lie, because you can't possibly arrive at happiness, because you can never get to the future. You can only live in the present moment. And so it's really fueling, this belief system is fueling the profits of companies, and that are, that 1% that is profiting off of the resource extraction. which goes hand in hand with colonialism. So we have to recognize that that's what's happening in our education system, that we're also all, you know, for those of us who are in it, that this is this big machine that we are also participating in. So how can we look to, where can we disrupt it or mitigate some of the harm that's happening? Because, you know, when you look at a map of Canada, for example, or when you look at a map, for example, in school, what is the map that we show kids every single year? We show them Canada, the provinces, cities, and towns. Well, where's the Anishinaabe on that map? Where's the Mushkegowuk? Where's the Haudenosaunee? Like, do you see how easily it is to erase people simply by mapping? So what else are we either leaving out or erasing, or either if we are bringing in content, is it minimizing or tokenizing or romanticizing these notions that's come about through colonialism?
Okay, this is what I, you know, when we talked about some of the belief systems that are different. I spent many years teaching my community, and, you know, we just didn't name our school. You know, they really put lots of effort and thought into naming our school. And so the school is called Mikinak, which means the turtle. And there is a big turtle rock as big as my house that's in front of that school, and that's who takes care of it. So the students are taught when they go there that they feast and feed that rock. But in the world of science, it's seen as a non-living thing. And so we have to explain to them, you know, you walk these two different systems or these two paths. And this is what we want for our children. We want them to be able to, you know, to be able to understand that system that they're in, and some of those things that Jody talked about, some of those things will not be acknowledged for them. And there's some things that will be left out. But we also want to teach them that they have these tools also to, you know, to be able to be confident in our system too, and to know that what our system is. And so they're very, we have the whole school feast has a big feast at the beginning of the school year, which is September. And even in that, saying that, you know, fall, that's when everything is quieting down for us in our culture. Everything is getting ready to quiet down and go to sleep for the winter. Everything, our new beginnings are in September, but the school is backwards on that too. And so these are some of the things that we like to, you know, empower them with and have those tools to be able to do that. So in our community, we have a roundhouse. So the best way we explain to them, you know, when you go to the school building here, it's like a rectangular building, and in there you're required to communicate a certain way. You know, you listen a certain way, and the way you speak is a certain way, and the way you conduct yourself behaviorally is a certain way. Then when you go to a roundhouse, you're expected to do different things there also. In school, you can interrupt and ask questions all you want to your teacher, but if you're in a setting in the roundhouse and the elder is speaking, you have to wait till they're done first. If you cut them off in the middle, you'll be seen as being disrespectful. Whereas in a academic setting of like with the school system, you're encouraged to do that. And if you don't do that, then the teacher sees you as you're not participating. So we try to give them tools like that to be able to handle themselves in both situations, to have those tools. That's one of our goals. And even in saying that, you know, when Jody talked about the, you know, the sending them to school, and the expectation for them is you finish this grade, you go to this grade, then you go to high school, then you go, you know, to college or university, then you have a career, and then you make money, and then we're supposed to be happy. And a lot of times, like a lot of them are struggling. No, I'm still not happy, because a lot of these things have to do with our identity. And especially like with the Anishinaabe people, they're always having to really work hard at taking a look at their identity and saying, who am I right now? And for example, for myself, being that Ana Kubajigan, but and I have to say, Ariana said it perfectly, pronounced it perfectly, that being that Ana Kubajigan, that great grandmother, I don't know how to be a great grandmother. And so I'm looking for that identity of, okay, what do I do here? Like, what is my role here? What's required of me? And then I find the grandmothers are the ones who teach me those tools that I have. So it's ongoing. It's going to be right from the day the child is born, looking for their identity, and to their, being a child and a teenager. It's all going to be all the time. And it's an ongoing learning and education. Whereas when we look at the, the academic system, in mainstream, there's certain grades you have to go to, and then when you're done, you're done. But for us, our education is from the moment we take that breath to the moment we stop breathing. So it's for ongoing. So those are some of the different things. So and teaching our children, the land is the one that's the most important. And we just use that example of the building, the shape, for them to understand that there's a different way to learn there and to teach and to communicate. And it's totally different at the roundhouse, where you go in there. And then as soon as you walk into that roundhouse, there's some trees there that they have like ribbons and stuff like that. You go to each one, you speak to them, you tell them who you are in that building, that roundhouse, and you say who you are and who your clan is, and then you offer your tobacco, and you go to each place in where we call them Mitiganabe, which is tree people. They're the ones who stand guard there for us. They take care of us. But we don't do that when we go to the school. I mean, and that part is usually not there, but they do have now things in the buildings where they can practice that too, in school structures. And the other thing about the education and for us, the Anishinaabe education, like I said, starts the day you take your breath. And everything that we teach our children and the adults, and for myself as a grandmother, everything that I'm learning is all about that good life on earth. And all our teachings are all about that. It's about being connected to that earth. Everything, right down to my name, Gijigokwa, which means the star woman or the sky woman. That's part of my name. And then when I say my clan, Awasasi, that's that we say bullhead or catfish. That's part of the water. So I'm connected to that water. And all those things that that we have in our system, education system. And the way we say education in our language, in the Anishinaabe is Akinomage, which means means the earth. And that no in there represents that stars. So actually our education is all about the land and the stars and everything here on earth. That's what our education is. Okay.
So if we think about then, when we think about Indigenous knowledge systems and STEM, part of the work of educators is to, kind of, and hopefully you're starting to get a sense of like the issues, the problems in education, and how the Western, public education system continues to, uphold or protect these values of colonialism, right? Like this need to profit, money over our health, our happiness, money over the health of the environment. So how do we, and subjects like science and math have not and are not neutral, that they also, have and continue to play a role in erasure. Like think about, my background is in science. I studied biology, and when I think about who I saw represented in scientific discoveries, it was all dead white guys. Well, that's not actually all true. There are other people who also have contributed quite significantly to scientific and mathematical discoveries, and in some cases were robbed of their discoveries and claimed by others. And so this is also another opportunity to think about, how are we representing, who are we representing in how we teach these subjects? If we think about, if we kind of break down math and even science into the essence of it, it's really, having an observation over a long period of time to really understand something in order to make predictions. And so if we think about Indigenous knowledge, it's also based on that same understanding. It's based on, a very, very long observation that is going on for thousands of years, to really intimately understand the world, the land, and how we interact with that. I think about, so many losses that has come through, residential schools and all of the other aspects of colonialism. I think about, because of the impacts of language, like we're in my board, like down south, we're trying, desperately to piece back our language, Anishinaabemowin, but, wrapped up in the language is like pharmacology knowledge, the knowledge of the plants. We didn't need, and we don't need really, pharmaceutical companies to be replicating what's already here. Like everything is provided for us. And that's some of the great losses that has had. And so even when we've embarked on this project to look at the star knowledge, has been quite difficult because of how fragmented those knowledges has been, because of the disruption that's taken place. So, I just wanted to point that out, that, and again, the other piece is reconsidering, if we're going to think about STEM, that Indigenous knowledge systems have a great value to play in really re-understanding the deep connection that we have to the natural world and our role within it. Anything you want to add on to that, Sandra?
What I wanted to add on was that, when I say, when even our language, we talk about the Mitiganabe, which means like there's a whole nation of all the trees, and they're a whole nation, and that's how we regard them when we talk to them. And then and there's certain ones that will, stand up for this or stand up for that in anything in our that we do in our everyday living. And there's also that plant knowledge, and we also regard them as a nation. And so we look at all these things, and then the fish nation, there's all kinds of different nations that we think about, all the time. But when we're in our everyday schooling, it's not there. Like we don't regard them as that. And like I say, we try to bring things like that into our school right now, and where I'm teaching. And so they have they do a flag song, and that's something that their community does, and they take pride in that because that's a song that was handed down to them. And I'm working there, and when I go there, that protocol again, even though they hired me to work there as a grade 3 teacher, I don't come there as an expert. I come there, I know my role, the protocol. I'm a guest there. And I know that they're going to treat me well, because if you guys came to my community as a guest, we treat you well. You come visit and we treat you well, with the idea that you guys were coming here respectfully. And so we will treat you well, we'll feed you, give us, give you our best foods and everything like that, and clothe you or whatever you need. If you need to sleep, we'll give you the best. And then you go on your travel, and that's what we call piteg, which means our visitors. And that respect is there, that that's that expectation that you will respect us. And so when I go to work there, I don't go there as an expert to tell them what to do. I'm their guest there. And I go there with an understanding that they have their own way of doing things. And I'm open-minded. I try not to influence even though we're just like 25 miles away from each other. That's another community, and their dialect is so different. And the reason why it's so different is because of the land that they're on and the land that I'm on. That's why our dialect is different. I live by a lake, 2 lakes, so our language is close to that lake, or it could be close to that river. If it's noisy, you might sound different, or you might, if it's a fast river, language might be, a little bit faster. It depends on the land that you're on. That's how these dialects work. And so here they are in this community that I travel every day. They have a slightly different dialect. They have do things slightly different. Their stories are, we could tell the same story, a legend, and it would be slightly different. But we have that respect that when you're there, that's how you say it. And when they come to my community, they know this is how you have to say it. For an example, could be, some of them say for mother, they might say ni mama. Another community might say nindutum. Another community might say it differently. And so we use that language that wherever they're at, that's that land acknowledgement part, piece and language. Then you will regard them that way. And when because I've worked in my community too as a teacher, when the teachers came who weren't, didn't have any of this knowledge, or weren't familiar with us, or they were non-native, but they came with their own ideas, and they put their own ideas in the system. And that's because that's what's required from the Ministry of Ed, the curriculum and the way we're supposed to conduct and do things. All that, the rules and everything that are taught are from a different system. And so it's really important, if you come to a community, or if you go to a setting where there's where they're having something to do with any of our teachings or ceremonies or information like this, that we'll be doing it slightly different. And that's what you observed when we did the opening. And I also wanted to speak on that silent speaker piece on our language. What's happened because of that timeline in our history before the colonizers, before we were colonized, First Nations people or Indigenous people, they were before they were colonized, all their life and everything had to do with the earth. Everything was connected with the seasons and everything. It was, and that's where our education was, like I mentioned before. And so what happens in our history is that we have all that trauma that has happened. And that includes our language too. And for me, when I went to school, when I first started, my mother said I was a very fluent speaker. And then all of a sudden after grade 1, I just stopped speaking it. And so today my struggle has been, I can hear it in my mind, the language so fluently. I can hear two people having a conversation. I know what they're saying. And then I can hear it in my head, and then I want to say it, but it doesn't come out over here in my mouth. It can't come out. And so what I've learned is that from a group of people who were looking at the language and the healing around it, and they said, you're a silent speaker. And I said, well, what does that mean? And then they said, the reason why you were unable to speak. She said, they said trauma happened to you. And I did find out what the trauma was later. And, you know, I've been working on it, on the trauma, and what's happening now is I'm becoming more, again, back to being fluent again. And I hope that I can be more fluent than I have been. So that's what I wanted to say. And one of the ladies that we worked with in this group, we had a Zoom session the other, and she's the same way. And then what she's saying is she's learning the songs. And so she said, I'm singing that language back to me. And I thought that was so beautiful. Okay. Jody?
So I think it, hopefully you're getting a real appreciation for why it's so important to be careful on when you're bringing in information into your classroom, that you don't paint everyone with the same brush, that it's, and that's why we have, like in our board, we have a visiting program so that many different people have different voices, different understandings, different ways of knowing. And so, we don't want to, because that happens often in education, that there's this, pan-Indianism. We paint everyone with the same brush, to be careful with that. And also just to reiterate that anything that you're considering to bringing in is you have to have the permission from the community that you're speaking to. So jumping into, so we're going to start moving into some examples of like how this is really helpful when we're considering Indigenous knowledge. I'm going to come back to that slide. I'm going to jump past to come back to that. So in the resource, this is just to give you kind of a sense, this is Isaac Murdoch, who's one of the contributors. We went to go visit with him and he was talking about, the construction of the lodge. Now, I'm not going to get into, there's a spiritual component to this, which is not necessary for this conversation, but the way the poles are even, the way the poles are aligned is connected to, in this example he gave us, the North Star, the South Star, and the Morning Star. And as he's explaining this, there's a video in the resource on this, and he's explaining this, it's got a very practical purpose. It's, when you're building your lodge, you want it just so that if it's raining or snowing, the sleet just kind of comes right off of it, right? Like there's a practical structural purpose to this. And so as he was explaining the connections to the positions of the stars when they're doing their pole alignments, here's an example of the North Star here. He says you look for the tree line, and there's a whole, you consider out your distance from the ground up to where you've marked that visual marker. And if you think about from the bottom of the tree to this star here in the Big Dipper, that actually creates a triangle, and that pole and how it's aligned is actually trigonometry. So there's a trigonometric ratio calculation that is happening in this process. And so it's just an example to share with you to know that to counter the narrative that Indigenous people were just like, frolicking in the forest, picking berries and not very smart, because that's the narrative that often gets played out in education. We have to start to disrupt that. And that's what we hope to do in this resource. Here's another way that, and again, most teachers in the system are non-Indigenous. So, I think I try to always remind people, listen and learn to the knowledge that is being shared. And in this resource, it's through video format. And then look for ways that you can make connections. So don't try and mimic or replicate the knowledge, but use it to inform connections and things that you might be able to try out. And ultimately, what we're trying to do too is get kids reconnected with the outdoors. And so I actually tried this myself. It took me quite a few times to get it. I tried, my husband, of course, he got it right away. So I was like, because we're not competitive or anything. But, here's just an example of how you can tell time using the Big Dipper. So have a watch.
Term. First, find the Big Dipper and the North Star. Next, trace a line through those last two stars of the Dipper, called the pointers, towards Polaris. Imagine Polaris is the center of a 24-hour clock, with its hour hand passing up to the pointers. But instead of turning clockwise, its hour hand turns backwards. There's another pretty big catch. You can only read this clock directly from the sky on March 6th. On any other night of the year, take the reading off the Dipper clock and subtract 2 times the number of months after March.
So that's just a little snippet. Now in the resource, which we'll get to, there's actually a whole math activity aligned with that to take into consideration those calculations to do those time telling. But again, you could do these things in your classroom and then invite students to try it out. You know, hopefully there's a clear night out or wait for a clear night. And, you know, the Big Dipper is such a prominent constellation that even in areas that is difficult to see because of light pollution, usually can pretty much pick out the Big Dipper at the very least. Another example of the profound sophistication of knowledge, Indigenous knowledge systems is, this is a picture here on the left that I took visiting my friend Dana, who's Dene from the Navajo Nation. That's near, it's down in the States, like kind of near Albuquerque area. And she's a collaborator on this resource as well. And this pictograph you see here, these spirals. Now, it's kind of common to see pictographs that are aligning with these big solar cycles. So the solstice, we're coming up to a solstice in a month from now, you know, the shortest day of the year. Then we have the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, the equinoxes, which are the middles. And so this rock formation, when the sun is at those cycles, it produces this little sun dagger, as you can see in the far right here. And it denotes, based on how the sun dagger comes and hits that spiral, whether it's the summer equinox, the winter equinox, the summer solstice or the winter solstice. But what really blew my mind, this same spiral also picked out the lunar cycles. Now, maybe you may know this or not, but the moon actually rises and sets at a different spot along the horizon. And actually it has a minimum and a maximum. So every 18 years, it goes back and forth. And so at the minimum on this spiral, it dings that spiral on the outer edge there. And at the maximum, it hits it right in the middle. And if you count the spirals, there's actually 9.5, because it's 18 and a bit actually, precisely that year. So talk about constant observation to make, you know, a pictograph into the rock to precisely identify those alignments. You know, that's incredible to be able to know that, and to be able to, you know, to inform what's happening in our lives on the ground based on these big celestial events. And so this is just one tiny little example of, you know, things that I think we take for granted, or, you know, don't consider enough in education. So now I'm going to show you a little video of the resource, and then I'm going to dive into the nuts and bolts of it. And then please ask questions. We're happy to answer your questions as well. So I'll play you this little video to give you an overview.
Hello everybody, it's Isaac Murdoch from Serpent River First Nation, and
I'm Jody Williams, and we are here to talk about a new resource that we're going to be sharing out with the world called Lessons from Beyond.
I think it's going to be an amazing resource for all of you, because it's all about beyond here. And the night sky is such a huge magical place, and we're using Indigenous knowledge as a way to explore that and to encourage people to get outside and to be a part of the great mystery that hangs above us.
The really cool thing that I love about this resource is that it invites teachers and students to really rethink and reimagine our ways of teaching and learning, and the importance of Indigenous knowledge systems and how they can actually help advance us as a society to do things in a way that's more sustainable with the earth. And it's a new, exciting approach to even thinking about how we learn about things like mathematics and science, and the incredible depth of knowledge and complexity that comes when we sit and listen to those Indigenous knowledge systems and what they have to offer.
When you look at old ancient systems, they all relied on the moon, the stars, the sun, and how that was in relation to food. And so I think Lessons from Beyond is something that can give us connections for sustainability. I really believe that.
The resource itself is based on several community members, Indigenous knowledge holders and elders from these lands, as well as other lands around the world. And we have also created it in a way that it's based on animations. So people like Isaac that you're seeing here in the human form is actually in an animated character in the resource in order to engage kids and invoke their curiosities using that format.
The virtual reality part is just mind-blowing, because essentially you put on these goggles and next thing you know you're in space, and everywhere you look with these goggles you're going to see stars and constellations like in real time. So as you're looking you'll say, okay, that's where the Big Dipper is, and there'll be a person there and you can click on that, and next thing you know that person is telling you a story in space.
So included in the resource is multiple teacher guides that provide links to activities that are connected specifically to the grades 6, 7, and 8 mathematics curriculum. However, the content that is on this website is suitable for all ages and all grades, and teachers are invited to look for creative ways to bring it into their classroom.
I think it's really important to introduce Indigenous knowledge systems to young people, because it's going to help shape a different worldview.
So we really hope that you'll enjoy this resource. Check it out. It's still ongoing. There's more iterations to come. We're forever building on it. We have a really cool partnership with NASA.
Yeah, it's fun. There's really interesting characters in this resource. Like, I've met them and they are all fascinating characters. You're not going to want to miss this.
So that gives you a little snippet of kind of
Hello,
what it
everybody.
is.
It's Isaac Murdoch from Serpent River.
Let's go past that. I think I should be able to click on this. Okay, so let's dive in. So if we go to the resource, and I will put in the chat box again, the link, in case you didn't get it before. So that's the link to it. Now, remember how I said this is the base building on, so the original one that we started with was Lessons from the Earth. And somebody had asked me in the chat earlier about PDF. So that's in here, and I'll come back to that after. So don't forget to ask me about that again to download those lessons. We also have another resource called Lessons from the Water. And then this is the one that we're now showcasing here. So when you click on this, takes you to this section of the resource. So there's, some pieces for educators. Actually, we got to update that because it's great for more than just grades in 6, 7, 8. That was how we started. And so there's, this is actually kind of what kickstarted it, was this culture camp. I encourage you to watch this documentary. It's really, really good. A lot of the collaborators are in this as well as students. And then there's 2 kind of sections. Now, it's designed to be somewhat self-directed if you wanted as a student to kind of go through it on your own, but I'll take you to the educator one first. So again, it just brings people to be thinking about, what we had mentioned before about the impacts of colonialism and how that has really impacted knowledge systems and how we're depicting people in classrooms. How it can be, further erased or inaccurate information. And then the other side to it is that hopefully you start to see the incredible depth and beauty of these knowledge systems, and that ultimately it comes back to our understanding as Sandra, as what you talk about as being Earth people. And maybe do you want to speak to a little bit about that important understanding? Because it's something that no matter who you are or where you come from, ultimately everybody is Indigenous to some place, to a land, to a people, to a language. And I mean, everywhere in the world has been colonized ultimately. But if we come back to our core roots of who we are as humans and our relationship to the world, if you want to talk a bit more on that, Sandra.
Sure. You know how I came to understand this is because like being that storyteller and hearing stories and then being able to tell my own story also. So there's just different types of stories. There's stories about, you know, the star formations, they come with legends. And so those stories are there. There's also family stories that you hand down from family to family, how, you know, like some families, their names, they have to have the Thunderbird in there all the time, or acknowledging that mermaid or something. And then some of them will have to do with like the sky, like myself. But there's families like that. So there's different family stories like that. There's also individual stories. And because our language is always, it's a living language. So there's the older language that they had before, you know, being colonized, and then coming to the stage where we're losing it and then we're regaining it again. And I really believe that our language, once even if you take one word, it tells you a whole big story. And that was one of the things I learned when I was about 17, the high school where I was at here. They told us to go and ask a question with the elders. And then we would just ask one word, and they would sit there for hours telling us stories. And that's just how our language was. And I learned a lot from that. But going back to being that Earth people, you know, there's before even in our legends, we have in our stories about creation, because there's so many creation stories we have as Anishinaabe people. One of them being when it was everything was dark, the beginning. And I also have I have my I call it a storytelling bundle, because people gave me things, pieces of this and that, and you know, I kept care of them, and they all tell a story, just like that one word that, you know, I was telling you in our language when we'd ask. So I'd have like here these little moccasins, they tell a story. And I was given this from a child, a little wrapped up doll, and then this shishig one here, this rattle. And these little things, I would keep them, and then I keep them all together, and they begin to tell a story. So with that that little shaker, that one is one of our creation stories. When everything was dark, that's the first sound you heard. And then it goes on, there's so many stories. But the people that were here, lowered here, one of them being that, you know, that first one. But, you know, and then all the other people came, and then when they're on, and so we are the first Earth people here. And it doesn't matter, you know, that's the number one thing, is we're all Earth people. And how a story came to me to understand that was through my name. My other second name, or the first name I had as a child, I should say, is first name, is Spirit Horse. And that Spirit Horse, I was connected to it. I was connected to Lake Superior, to the horses. And it wasn't until a few years ago that that I was troubled with something, because I was in the field of social work also, and that's a heavy duty job. And so I carried something, trying to help another person, and I carried their story, and I didn't know how to let it release from me. And so I carried it. It was heavy and everything, and we were doing at the time equine therapy to teach us so we could help our clients. So here we are working with the horses. And then I couldn't connect with that horse, because that horse, you know, when you connect with the horses, you speak this language to them. And that's what our teacher taught us there. She said, these horses here, in order to communicate with them, she said, you have to speak earth language. And then I was thinking, what's the earth language? And here we all have it. The horse has it. We have it. And I had to be clear here. I wasn't clear in my whole core here because that thing was blocking me. So that's why I couldn't connect with the horses. So I told a lady, she says, you need to, she said, this is why you're here. She said, that's a perfect example. She said, pick any horse you want, go tell them your story. So I did. I picked a horse and I told the horse the story. So I told that horse the whole thing. And I said, and I don't want you to keep it. And I had tears coming down. And I said, because this is something that no human being should hear, or even you, I said. And I said, do you understand? And that horse shook his head. And I just about, like, I jumped back and I was shocked that the horse understood me. I'm using my words though. And so I talked to the horse some more and I hugged the horse, and then I was saying, and then I was done. And then I said, okay, remember now, I said, don't keep this either. I said, when you feel that wind, I said, let it come off of your back. Do you understand? And that horse said, okay. And I was shocked. And so when I came back to the trainer, and I told her, okay, I'm done. And so the next day when we came back, she wasn't joining us, that horse. And the trainer said, I don't know what's up with her. She said, but as soon as I opened the door, she said to her stall, she took off like the wind. And I said, oh my goodness. I said, that was me, because I told her not to hang on to it and I wanted the wind to take it away. And then, so she said, so, and that day I was able to connect with they brought her back and I was connected to her and the other horses. And I was walking with them, and all I had to do was make the, say it in my head, okay, I'm gonna turn left. And I would walk with that horse, first with the harness, then we took it off, and then pretty soon it was just talking, and then we'd go left, and I'd say forward, and then we'd go forward, then right. And that's the oldest language, and that's what the lady taught me. She said, now you're speaking the oldest language in the, you know, that's the, and she said it's the earth language. That's the oldest language there. We all have it. And she said, doesn't matter if all people have it. So that's the first, you know, and keeping that connection. So encourage the students to be connected to the earth. And that's how they connect with speaking that language. And what she told me, she said, horses can't think of the future, she said. And horses can't think of the past. She said, and not like us, because if we get stuck in the past, she said, we get depressed. But if we're thinking too much in the future, she said, that's how we get anxiety. We have to be present and enjoy what's here. And so that's what I took away with that, from the horse being connected with my name, and also being the earth, one of the, you know, being earth people in that language. And so I understood now why Nana Boozhoo in our legends was able to talk to the trees and to the birds in our legends and to the water, and they could talk back. That's, and we all have it. If we close our eyes and sit long enough with the earth, we still have it. And one of the young men that came to me, and he's not native, and he wanted to, you know, he wanted to just so I could listen to him. And he loves hunting. So I told him the story about him being connected like that, having that, you know, earth language. And I said, it's like when you go hunting, I said, you can feel the air and it's talking to you, and you know what time of day it is. And I said, and you just look at the, you know, the where you're at around the earth, and you know when that deer's coming, and you know which day it is. And he said, exactly, I know it. I said, because you're speaking the oldest language, and you know, to the trees and to everything there. And then he said, and you know what? He said, sure enough, I know what time. He said, I'll wake up and I'll know what time to be over there in that certain place in the woods there. He said, and sure enough, that deer will come out of the, you know, early morning fog. And then he said, then it's like that deer is saying, okay, I'm giving my life up, you know, to you, so you can feed your family. So we all have that. Okay.
It's double. So.
Yeah, and so like that's what we're hoping for through this resource, is that, you know, you learn from the videos that are presented here that have been given with permission, and then make those connections back to you, and invite your students to make those connections back to them. And ultimately, we want to get back to our deep connection and our deep love for the earth and the stars and everything and all of life, because, you know, if we are in love with this creation, then we're going to defend it. We're going to make sure it's still existing, because we're doing a terrible job right now. So anyway, I always think too, if you really want to know what we should be doing, we should just ask like a grade 1 kid. They know, they're really connected, and they have the answers on that. The other thing I want to just point out here is one of our contributors, and like one of the main people who's like just an incredible wealth of knowledge when it comes to the stars, is Wilfred Buck. And there's a video here, and he talks about what's happened when we say story, because again, this product of colonial thinking, right? So when we oftentimes in the education world, we say story, that automatically there's an association to myths, legends, and lore and fairy tales, which equates to it's not really real. So we want to bust that thinking. We want to change that thinking. When we say story, we want to think about it as knowledge transference, as a way of conveying important information. Maybe it's geographical information or scientific information or whatever that is. Story is actually a really good way of remembering things too. And so I'm going to quickly pop over. Let me open this one up, and then I will pop over to, because I'll come back to the teacher guide, because that's what teachers love. But I want to pop over to the student page for a minute. And the this is actually based on another Shannon Paul. This is her. This is actually her name and who she is, and she's kind of like the avatar that guides you through the resource. And she talks about the significance of her name, similar to what you heard Sandra here. And actually, we have a previous video that we did with Sandra talking about the importance of the name. So there's another elder from that we did connected back into another resource. So there's some other pieces in here. And this is an area somebody had asked in the chat box here. I want to kind of go back to, where was it? The question around, I got to scroll back. Something about metaphysics, grade 12. So this is the comment I put in the chat box. These are actually, we tried to make sure any video that we do is, within a 5-minute-ish time frame, because we know attention spans these days are non-existent. But they each have something really important to share around the importance of this. So this is what I was referring to in the chat box for the grade 12 students. Also in the other iteration, Lessons from the Earth, just so you know, there's a section under intermediate, but in the intermediate section, there's there's an inquiry piece in there that gets into looking at kind of like for secondary students, looking at the resource extraction and the impact on First Nation communities. So there's a whole section in there you can like dive into and have some really deeper conversations around the ethics of mining, for example. So anyway, so these are our contributors, and on our official launch on December 2nd, they're all going to be here present for that. So it's an opportunity to kind of meet and greet everyone. And then, as mentioned in the little video, so we've also done them in animation, because originally this iteration we started out for younger audiences, but I have kids in secondary and they appreciate the animation as well in secondary. So there's that. And you'll notice here's Sandra. I love her little animation, it's so cute. But what I wanted to build on what Sandra was saying before, there's this little piece, and she speaks to it here in this little animation as well. Again, the importance of story, and that everyone carries a story. Everyone has a way of relating and understanding. And so, here's the opportunity that, again, to have kids to make connections. What is your story? What is your understanding? What is your story with your connection to the trees, to the water? So there's so much potential for rich dialogue and kids to really think about their own ways that they connect into that. And when you do that, it's actually helping to inform and empower and strengthen their own identities as well. So this is now where we're going to dive in to this resource. So as mentioned, so there's kind of three main parts to it. So this first section is kind of like, the big provocation, I guess, in our lesson plans, when you think about like the minds on. So this is a big minds on piece. It doesn't really get into explicit math connections yet in this piece, because it's really kind of setting the tone and getting kids comfortable with listening to the different contributors. And so then you'll also have these little interactive classrooms as well that walk you through some more teachings. This one brings in Dene stories, Maori stories. We do, one of our collaborators is Maori from New Zealand. And then, as I mentioned, we have a NASA partnership. So one of the NASA people, Daniela, is also in a little animation. And then again, like I was saying, there's these interactive classrooms that you can navigate directly on the website as well. So you can see they have these different, and then there's a conversation, a dialogue here between Daniela and Isaac. Again, so looking at how these pieces can come into dialogue with each other. The other one that I mentioned in the chat box is to the metaphysics question, is this video here. It's really, really incredible. So this is Deahande, who's from Six Nations of the Grand, Ganyegahaga or Mohawk. And he talks about giving that example about how the language also, the language for star, the word for star is the same as who you are, the fire, your fire, or your your spirit, or who the essence of who you are, your fire is the same. It's connected to the same word for star. So there's just all these really cool ways to look at how there's so many interconnected understandings with this. And then this is now when we start to kind of get into, there's a heavy focus on math because it was connected to our math project. So now we start to get into a little bit of math and such. So when we get into, and there's also related math activities connected into one of the other people that we work with through the Math Knowledge Network, Dr. George Gadanitas, and he does some really awesome things with coding and kids. So there's connects there. And then this next section is patterns in the night sky. So I'm going to jump over to this teacher guide that I had clicked on earlier. So this is, this is the teachery document that walks through, it kind of, has the same thing as what's on the website. So let me just scroll down and get into some of the pieces. There's links to other resources as well embedded in here. There's a matrix. So as I mentioned, it's connected to the new math curriculum, grades 6, 7, 8, and we are building onto that. And so there's this matrix that shows specifically where those connections lie in that new curriculum. And I just want to roll down to, as I mentioned, see, these are our big sections. So we come from the stars, that's the kind of provocation area. Patterns in the night sky, that's where I'm at right now. The technology of travel. So this gets into looking at canoes and rocketry and the similarity in terms of the engineering design process. And then this one here, oh, Little Grandmother Moon is just, it's still in its infancy stage. We are still expanding on. We're going to build onto that. So more will come down the line, building out the connections to the moon. But let me just, I want to get to this part here. Okay, teacher guide and lesson plans. So you'll see here in this, there are 5 done out lessons already done. And in those lessons, when you click on this, you will find, let it open up again. So it kind of dives deeper into the math. So this is specific to measurement, location, and movement. And each, so again, more specifically, it tells you precisely where the curriculum expectations, the alignment is happening in these lessons. And then you'll notice that each one has a slide deck that we've pre-done for you that you can click on. So you can just use this directly in your classroom. So let's say I'm the grade 6 teacher, I can use this directly and teach right off the slide deck. For example, I show this in my classroom and I ask the question to students, what do you see? What do you wonder? Generate conversation out of that. What do you see now? And then leading into this idea that, you know, constellations is a way to start to make sense of some of the patterns that we see in the night sky. And then, do you recognize this? This is a very common one, right? Like the Big Dipper. But did you know that there's other ways to understand this constellation? And so you can ask them, can you find the Big Dipper on this Ojibwe star map? And hopefully maybe they land here. They click here. And so, yes, this is also in the, for Ojibwe peoples, known as the Fisher. And then there's a link back to the Fisher story, which is actually the original story that got this whole thing kickstarted in the first place, the lessons from the earth. So that brings us full circle on that one. And then here in this one, this is a Cree Star Map. So again, looking at the finding the Big Dipper, here it is here. And in this example, there's actually several Cree stories related to this grouping of stars. And then here's one by Wilfred Buck for you to share. So again, it's just getting students familiar with this notion that there are other ways other than the typical Greek constellations that we have all kind of grown up with, understanding and relating to the night sky. So that's just one little sample, and then it gets into, and it builds on from there, and they all have similar slide, like those type of things, like a slide deck, and it gets into exploring shapes, which and into measurements and angles and things like that. So going back to and again, like we've kind of done it out, so it's a bit of a, you know, it could be self-guided. This is Kevin, the math guy, and he kind of sets it up, understanding about patterns, which is this understanding and making predictions because of recognizing patterns. You know, again, the Big Dipper, we mentioned that. This is the one where I talked about the building of the lodge. So there's a piece in here. Wilfred talks about, you know, getting lost and finding his way out, orientating himself through the night sky. There's an activity, create a star clock. Like there's all kinds of little goodies in here for you. And as I mentioned, that other one, technology of travel. So this one kind of gets into looking at, Wilfred shares a Cree telling of the night sky that connects into the canoe. And then we dive into looking at the engineering design process with Dr. Juan Carlos Chavez, who's also, he's Yaqui, but he also works with NASA. So anyway, so that's like the high level kind of overview of this resource. And, you know, I hope that it's helpful for you and that, you know, you make use of it. And like I said, there's more iterations coming on, and I'm just going back here to the chat box to see if there's any other, I see, okay, question for primary. Are you going to have, yes, so primary, yeah, you can kind of, you would have to kind of go through yourself and decide, because of those animations, like which ones might be best for your students. But we are, this year, that's one of our project goals, is to build out a primary component with a teacher guide and pieces like that. But definitely on the other, that first one, the lessons from the earth, there's a whole, I'll just go back there really quickly to show that to you. In here, this was our first one. Right here, resources for primary, whole giant thing on for primary for you right there. So is there any other questions in regards to this resource? The other thing, one last thing, I wanted to share. Just a last little consideration here. So some kind of do's and don'ts. So as we wrap up. So I think we've, said a lot about make space and create opportunities for Indigenous people to have voice and represent themselves. For those who work in a provincial school board, check in. Every board has an Indigenous education lead. That's my role in my board, and that's my job, is to connect classrooms with community members to come and speak and share. Make sure that you're citing your sources, and if you can't cite a source, that's a red flag. All knowledges have an origin. Be very careful on what's online. Don't, avoid the mimicking and replicating. That's where, people kind of get in a lot of trouble with respect to appropriating. Don't teach aspects of culture that is like, there's a difference between teaching history and facts, or, bringing in contributions of people versus mimicking cultural knowledges, or that are also intertwined with a spiritual component of that. That should really remain with Indigenous peoples to do that part of it. There's lots of other things though, like, again, contributions. Wouldn't it be great if kids saw, all kinds of representation from the nations here? So those are just a few things to be thinking about. And I'm just going to turn it over to Sandra for last kind of to close us up.
Okay, miigwech for everyone for for joining us this evening, and I really enjoy doing this kind of work, and it's just amazing how now we can reach more people through technology. And I just want to say about that technology piece too is there is some things that one of the things that we did in our community when we looked at technology back in 2000, when we knew it was coming, the elders knew, and we were trying to get them to understand what it was then, and how big it was going to be. It was going to be in every home. So one of the things that they told us, they said there is a place where technology belongs in our teachings and our stories, but there's another place where it doesn't belong at all. And then I said, well, how would I know then? And they said, that's why we're here. You got to come to us and we'll tell you. So, and then the other part I wanted to end was with the video that we did a voiceover. And just to remind you again, like I did that first piece, just I talking, and then now we're going to show you with a little bit of a voiceover on it.
Well, we would if I had it loaded. Which I don't.
Okay.
If you'd like, I can wrap things up if it doesn't.
Yeah, that's yeah.
I forgot to put that piece in.
That's okay. Do you mind if I share my screen?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. All right, let's see. So I wanted to just say thank you so much to both Jody and Sandra this evening, just for this opportunity to sit, to learn, to reflect. It was truly definitely a gift just to be able to experience this afternoon, to be able to listen, to hear story, as well as to be able to understand how this resource can be used in classrooms. So I wanted to say thank you so much for that. I also wanted to let participants know that over the next couple of days, you should receive an email with an evaluation form for this webinar. I'll also put it in the chat for you in case you are eager to be able to complete it and kind of share how great the session was. And you're also going to be receiving the links to the resource that Jody and Sandra shared with us, as well as the link to an archived version of this webinar. It's going to be available for the next month. I'll also let you know that our next webinar is coming up this Thursday at 4:30. It's entitled Combating Online Hate in Schools, What to Know and What to Do. And that's going to be by Melissa Meckel as well as Emily Thompson. Always, please feel free to check out the events calendar on the OTF website for more information on how to join. And again, I really just wanted to say thank you so much for this evening. It was absolutely incredible. I sat here and I was learning so much and just feeling so very inspired to be in this space. So I just want to say thank you very much for that. I'll stop sharing, Jody, if you'd like.
I forgot to put into the chat box, oh my goodness, the link to our launch. Let me quickly do that.
That's okay, for sure.
So our launch that's happening December 2nd, I'm going to put in, okay, let me put that in the chat box there. So that's to register to get it's just going to be out on YouTube. December 2nd, 7 p.m. If you want to meet all the collaborators, everyone, even our New Zealand people are joining us as well. So there you go.
That's awesome. Did you want to share your other link, or are we just going to wrap up for this evening?
Oh yeah, I forgot to put it in.
No
so
worries at all. So thank you everyone for this evening. I hope that you take care of yourselves. And thank you so much, Jody. And thank you so much, Sandra. I appreciate that.